Chapter 25. The next day, toward 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a carriage drawn by two magnificent English horses stopped before the Count of Monte Cristo's door. In it was a man wearing a blue coat with silk buttons of the same color, brown trousers, and a white vest crossed by an enormous gold chain. His hair was so black and hung down so far over his forehead that it hardly seemed natural, for it was completely out of keeping with the deep wrinkles it failed to conceal. He was, in short, a man of 50 or 55 who tried to appear 40. Putting his head through the window of his carriage, he sent his groom to ask whether the Count of Monte Cristo was at home. The groom knocked on the porter's window and asked, "Is this the Count of Monte Cristo's residence?" "His Excellency lives here, but he's engaged now," replied the porter. "In that case, here's the card of my master, Baron Danglars." It's all coming together na gid, guys. Caderousse, the innkeeper who most possibly murdered the jeweler, and a witness to this is now a servant of the Count of Monte Cristo. Villefort was stabbed in this secret garden while he was burying a dead baby, again witnessed by the servant of the Count of Monte Cristo. We have Mondego, no? Fernan Mondego is now married to Mercedes, and they have a son, Albert, who is now getting very close to the Count of Monte Cristo, and now Danglars has visited the Count of Monte Cristo. "In that case, here's the card of my master, Baron Danglars. Please take it to the Count of Monte Cristo and tell him that the Baron stopped on his way to the chamber in order to have the honor of seeing him. I don't speak to His Excellency, but his valet will deliver the message." The groom returned to the carriage and reported the answer he had been given. "He must be a prince, then, this man they call His Excellency, and to whom no one but his valet has the right to speak," said Danglars. "But that's all right, since he has a credit opened with me, he'll have to see me when he needs money." He sat back in his carriage and called out to the coachman, so loudly that he could be heard on the other side of the street, to the Chamber of Deputies. Monte Cristo, who had been notified of the Baron's visit in time to see him, had been studying him from behind a window blind with the aid of a pair of powerful binoculars. "Ali," he called out, striking a copper gong. Ali appeared. "Call Bertuccio," said Monte Cristo. Bertuccio entered at almost the same moment. "Did your Excellency wish to see me?" he asked. "Yes. Did you see the horses that stopped in front of my door just now?" "Certainly, your Excellency." "They're extremely handsome horses." "Why is it," said Monte Cristo, frowning, "that when I've asked you to get me the two finest horses in Paris, there are two horses in Paris as handsome as mine, and yet they're not in my stable?" On seeing the Count's frown and hearing the stern intonation of his voice, Ali bowed his head. "It's not your fault, Ali," said the Count in Arabic, with a gentleness with which one would not have expected to find either in his voice or on his face. "You know nothing about English horses." Ali's features took on their look of serenity once again. "Your Excellency," said Bertuccio, "the horses you mentioned weren't for sale." Monte Cristo shrugged and said, "Don't you know that anything is for sale to a man who's willing to pay the price?" "Monsieur Danglars paid 16,000 francs for them, sir." "Well then, you should have offered him 32,000. He's a banker, and a banker would never miss a chance to double his capital." "Are you speaking seriously, sir?" asked Bertuccio. Monte Cristo looked at him as though astonished that he should ask such a question. "I have a call to make at 5 o'clock this afternoon," he said. "I wish to have those horses harnessed to my carriage and waiting for me then." "May I point out to your Excellency that it's now 2 o'clock?" said Bertuccio timidly. "I know," was Monte Cristo's only reply. At 5 o'clock, the Count struck his gong 3 times. 1 stroke was for Ali, 2 for Baptistin, and 3 for Bertuccio. The steward entered. "My horses," said Monte Cristo. "They're harnessed to your carriage, sir." The Count went outside and saw the horses he had admired in front of Danglars' carriage 3 hours earlier. "They're really handsome horses," he said. "You were right to buy them, although you were a little late." "I had great difficulty getting them, sir," said Bertuccio, "and I had to pay a very high price for them." "Are they any less handsome because of that?" asked the Count, shrugging his shoulders. Bertuccio turned to go away. "Wait," said Monte Cristo, stopping him. I need an estate on the seacoast in Normandy, for example between Le Havre and Boulogne. It must have a small harbor which my corvette can enter. She draws only 15 feet of water. The ship must always be ready to put to sea, no matter what hour of the day or night. I give the order. Make inquiries about such an estate, and when you hear of one, go to see it. If you're satisfied with it, buy it in your own name. The corvette is on her way to Ficam now, isn't she? I saw her put to sea the same evening we left Marseille. And the yacht? She's at Marty. Very well. Correspond with the two captains from time to time to make sure they don't go to sleep. The Count climbed into his carriage and ordered his coachman to drive him to the residence of Baron Danglars. The Baron's white and gold salon was well known on the Rue de la Chaussée d'Antin. It was there that he had his visitor shown on his arrival in order to dazzle him right from the start. Have I the honor of addressing the Monsieur de Monte Cristo? Asked the Baron when he entered. And have I the honor of addressing Baron Danglars, Chevalier of the Legion of Honor and member of the Chamber of Deputies? The Count was repeating the titles he had read on the Baron's card. Danglars felt the thrust and bit his lip. I've received a letter from the firm of Thomson and French, said Danglars, but I must admit that its meaning isn't very clear to me. In fact, I came by your house today to ask you to explain it to me. So the Count of Monte Cristo and Danglars are talking business. I'm listening, and I'll be glad to help you. I have the letter right here, said Danglars, drawing it from his pocket. It opens an unlimited credit for you with my firm. Well, Baron, what's obscure about that? Nothing, but the word unlimited. Do you think the firm of Thomson and French isn't perfectly reliable? Asked Monte Cristo, as naively as he could. Oh, perfectly reliable, replied Danglars with an almost mocking smile. But in financial matters, the word unlimited is so vague. Vagueness is doubtfulness, and the wise man will stay away from doubtful things. Let me try to make myself clear by asking you to name the sum you expect to draw on me. The reason I opened an unlimited credit with you is precisely that I don't know how much money I'll need. The banker leaned back in his chair with a heavy, arrogant smile and said, Oh, don't be afraid to ask. You may be sure that my funds, limited though they may be, are sufficient to meet the highest demands, and even if you were to ask for $1 million, pardon, I said $1 million, repeated Danglars with all the self-assurance of stupidity. But what good would $1 million do me, said the Count. If I needed only $1 million, I wouldn't have bothered opening a credit for such a trifling sum. Why, I always carry at least that much with me. So saying, he drew from his card case 2 treasury bonds for 500,000 francs each. A man like Danglars must be bludgeoned, not merely pricked, and this blow had its effect. He stared at Monte Cristo in a daze. Come now, admit that you mistrust the firm of Thomson and French, continued the Count. I allowed for that possibility, and although I don't know much about business, I took my precautions. Here are 2 other letters like the one that was sent to you. One is from the firm of Arstein and Escalès of Vienna, opening an unlimited credit for me with Baron de Rothschild. The other is from Baring of London, and is addressed to Monsieur Lafitte. This was the coup de grace. Danglars was vanquished. He opened the 2 letters with trembling hands and verified the signatures with a scrupulousness which would have been insulting to Monte Cristo if he had not been aware of the banker's bewilderment. Here are 3 signatures which are worth many millions, said Danglars, standing up as though to pay tribute to the power of gold personified in the man sitting before him. 3 unlimited credits. Excuse me, Count, but while I'm no longer mistrustful, I'm still astonished. Well then, said Monte Cristo, now that we understand each other, now that there's no longer any mistrust between us, shall we fix an approximate sum for the first year, say 6 million, for example? Very well, 6 million, said Danglars hoarsely. The Count stood up. I must confess one thing to you, Count, said Danglars. I thought I was rather well acquainted with all the large fortunes of Europe, yet yours was completely unknown to me. Is it of recent date? No, on the contrary, it's very old. It's a sort of family treasure which it was forbidden to touch and which was tripled by the accumulation of interest. The period fixed by the testator expired only a few years ago, so your ignorance was quite natural. You'll learn more about it in a short time. He accompanied these words with one of those pale smiles which had so frightened Franz d'Épinay. Yes, that will be for later when we know each other better, said Danglars. For today, I'll content myself with presenting you to Madame Danglars. Excuse my eagerness, Count, but a client like you is almost part of the family. Okay, so the Count is basically joining the bank of Danglars. No, Danglars has done very well in life. He's now a part of a very big bank, no, and the Count is kind of putting his money with Danglars. He's doing business with Danglars. Monte Cristo bowed as a sign that he accepted the honor. Danglars rang, and a servant appeared. "Is the Baroness at home?" asked Danglars. "Yes, sir." "Is she alone?" "No, Madame has company." "And who is Madame's company, Monsieur Debray?" asked Danglars with a joviality that made Monte Cristo smile inwardly, for he was already acquainted with the banker's transparent family secrets. "Yes, sir, it's Monsieur Debray," replied the servant. Danglars nodded. Turning to Monte Cristo, he said, "Monsieur Debray is an old friend of ours and is secretary to the Minister of the Interior. As for my wife, she lowered herself by marrying me, for she comes from an ancient family. She was Mademoiselle de Servières, and later a widow of the Marquis of Nargonne. I haven't had the honor of meeting Madame Danglars, but I've already met Monsieur Lucien Debray." "Where was that?" "At Monsieur Albert de Morcerf's house." "Ah, you know the young Vicomte. We were in Rome together during the carnival." "Oh yes, I think I heard about some strange adventures of his with bandits. Some sort of miraculous escape. I believe he told my wife and daughter about it when he returned from Italy." "The Baroness awaits you, gentlemen," said the servant, entering the room once again. "Allow me to show you the way," said Danglars to the Count of Monte Cristo. So he's gonna meet the wife of Danglars, who's a baroness, no? She's a baroness, okay? Baroness Danglars. Madame Danglars, whose beauty was still outstanding despite her 36 years, was at her piano while Lucien Debray sat looking through an album. Debray had already had time to tell the Baroness quite a number of things about the Count. Her curiosity, aroused by both Albert's stories and the new details brought to her by Lucien, was now at its height. She therefore received her husband with a smile, which was contrary to her custom, and gave the Count a ceremonious yet gracious bow. Debray exchanged a semi-familiar greeting with the Count and an intimate one with Danglars. "Allow me to introduce the Count of Monte Cristo," said Danglars. "I will say only one thing about him, which will make him a great favorite of our fair ladies. He has come to Paris with the intention of staying here for a year and spending 6 million francs during that time, which means that we may expect a series of balls, dinners, and supper parties." "You've chosen a very bad time to come here," said Madame Danglars. "Paris is detestable in summer. There are no balls, receptions, or banquets. The Italian opera is in London, and the French opera is everywhere except in Paris. Our only entertainment consists of a few wretched horse races at the Champ de Mars and Satori. Do you like horses, Count?" "I've spent a good part of my life in the Orient, Madame, and as you know, the Orientals appreciate only two things in this world, the nobility of horses and the beauty of women." Just then Madame Danglars' confidential maid entered and whispered a few words into her mistress's ear. The Baroness turned pale and said, "Impossible." Then turning to her husband, she said, "Is what my maid tells me true?" "What has she told you?" asked Danglars, visibly agitated. "She says that when my coachman went to harness my horses to my carriage, he found that they weren't in the stable. May I ask what that means?" "Listen to me," said Danglars. "Oh, I'll listen to you, because I'm very curious to hear what you're going to tell me. I'll ask these gentlemen to be our judges, and I'll begin by telling them the facts. Gentlemen, Baron Danglars has 10 horses in his stable. 2 of them are mine. They're magnificent horses, the finest in Paris. You know them, Monsieur Debray, my dappled grace. Now, just when I'm about to lend my carriage to Madame de Villefort to go to the Bois de Boulogne tomorrow, these 2 horses are nowhere to be found. Monsieur Danglars has no doubt managed to make a few thousand francs on them and sold them. Oh, what an abominable breed these speculators are." "My dear, these horses were too spirited," said Danglars. "They were only 4 years old, and they made me terribly frightened for your sake. I'll find you other horses like them, even finer, if there are any, but they'll be calm, gentle horses, which won't inspire me with such terror." The Baroness shrugged her shoulders with an air of profound contempt. Exclaimed Debray, "Unless I'm mistaken, I see your horses harnessed to the Count's carriage." My dappled greys, cried Madame Danglars. She rushed over to the window. Yes, they're mine. Danglars was dumbfounded. Can it be possible? Said the Count, affecting astonishment. Danglars said nothing. He foresaw a disastrous scene in the very near future. Debray, who also felt the storm approaching, left on some invented pretext. Monte Cristo, who did not wish to spoil his advantage by remaining too long on this occasion, bowed to Madame Danglars and withdrew, abandoning the Baron to his wife's anger. Very good, thought the Count as he left. I have accomplished my aim. The Danglars' domestic peace is now in my hands, and I am about to win the gratitude of both the Baron and the Baroness at one stroke. I would have liked to be introduced to Mademoiselle Eugène Danglars, but we have ample time ahead of us, and that can wait till later. With this reflection, he climbed into his carriage and returned home. 2 hours later, Madame Danglars received a charming letter from the Count of Monte Cristo, in which he stated that, not wishing to make his entrance into Paris society by distressing a pretty woman, he would be grateful to her if she would take back her horses, which he had sent to her along with a letter. They were wearing the same harness she had seen on them that morning, except that the Count had a diamond inserted in each of the rosettes they wore on their ears. Okay, so the Count bought her horses and then he sent them back to her, but this time their harnesses had diamonds in them. Danglars also received a letter in which the Count asked his permission to satisfy a millionaire's whim and begged him to excuse the oriental manner in which he had sent back the horses. That evening, Monte Cristo went to his country house at Atier, accompanied by Ali. The next afternoon, Ali, summoned by the gong, entered the Count's study. Ali, said Monte Cristo, I understand you're very skillful in throwing the lasso. Is that right? Ali nodded and drew himself up proudly. Good. Could you stop an ox with a lasso? Ali nodded. A tiger? Another nod. A lion? Ali pretended to throw a lasso and imitated a choked roar. I understand. Have you hunted lions? Ali nodded proudly. But could you stop 2 runaway horses? Ali smiled. Very well then, listen. A short time from now, a carriage will pass by drawn by 2 runaway, dappled gray horses, the same ones I had yesterday. Even at the risk of being trampled, you must stop them in front of my door. Ali went out into the street and traced a line on the pavement in front of the door. Then he came back inside and pointed out the line to the Count, who had been watching him. The Count tapped Ali gently on the shoulder. It was his way of thanking him. The Nubian went outside, sat down in front of the house, and began to smoke his chibok. His chibok? Chibok. Suddenly, a distant but rapidly approaching rumble was heard. Then a carriage appeared. The coachman was vainly trying to stop the horses, which were running wildly at tremendous speed. So he returns the horses to Madame Danglars, and then the horses are going wild. They're going wild, no? Inside the carriage, a young woman and an 8-year-old boy were clinging to each other, so terror-stricken that they were unable even to utter a cry. A stone under a wheel or a low-hanging tree would have been enough to cause the carriage to be smashed. Ali suddenly set down his chibok, drew a lasso from his pocket, threw it, caught the front legs of the left-hand horse, and let himself be dragged along for 3 or 4 steps. But at the end of those 3 or 4 steps, the horse fell, preventing the other horse from continuing its wild race. The coachman leaped down from his seat, but Ali had already seized the second horse by the nostrils in an iron grip, and neighing in pain, it sank down beside its companion. All this was done in the time it takes for a bullet to hit its mark. It was nevertheless long enough for a man to dart out of the house in front of which the accident occurred, followed by several of his servants. As soon as the coachman opened the door of the carriage, this man lifted out the lady, who was clutching a pillow with one hand and pressing her fainting son to her bosom with the other. Monte Cristo carried them both into his house and set them down on a divan. You're safe now, madame, he said. The woman pointed to her son with a look that was more eloquent than any entreaty. The child was still unconscious. Yes, madame, I understand, said the Count, examining the boy, but there's no cause for alarm. He hasn't been injured in any way. He only fainted from fear. Oh, don't tell me that just to reassure me. Look how pale he is. Oh, my son, my child, my Edward. Speak to your mother. Please, sir, send for a doctor. I'll give my entire fortune to anyone who can bring back my son to me." Monte Cristo opened a small chest, drew out a flask containing a blood-red liquid, and allowed a single drop of it to fall between the child's lips. Although still pale, the boy opened his eyes almost immediately. On seeing this, his mother became almost delirious with joy. "Where am I?" she cried. "And to whom do I owe so much happiness after such a cruel ordeal?" Okay, so that was a lot. That was a lot of information, no? Basically, the horses went wild, but the Count's servant stopped them and saved the people inside the carriage. And then the Count brings back to life the little boy who fainted with the red liquid. And where have we seen this red medicine before, guys? You have to start making those connections. Now, where have we seen this red liquid that kind of like brings a person back, even though they're fainting or even though they're almost dead? "Madame," said Monte Cristo, "you're in the house of a man who considers himself lucky to have the opportunity of sparing you pain." And remember, who was she gonna... Madame Danglars owns the carriage and the horses, no? Who was she going to lend her carriage to? Do you remember? She was gonna lend it to Madame Villefort, the wife of Monsieur Villefort. So this is the wife of Villefort. "It was all because of my cursed curiosity," said the lady. "Everyone in Paris was speaking of Madame Danglars' magnificent horses, and I was foolish enough to want to try them." "What?" exclaimed the Count in admirably feigned surprise. "Do those horses belong to the Baroness?" "Yes. Do you know her?" "I've had the honor of meeting her, and I'm doubly glad to have saved you from the danger in which those horses placed you, because you might have attributed it to me. I bought those horses from the Baron yesterday, but the Baroness seemed so grieved at having lost them that I sent them back to her the same day." "Then you must be the Count of Monte Cristo, whom Hermine spoke to me about yesterday." "Yes, I am, madame. And I am Madame Heloise de Villefort." I knew it! The Count bowed as though he had just heard a name that was completely unknown to him. "Oh, how grateful Monsieur de Villefort will be," said Heloise. "You've saved his son and his wife at the same time. If it hadn't been for your courageous servant, this dear child and I would both have been killed. I do hope you'll allow me to give that man a reward worthy of his devotion." "Please don't spoil Ali for me, madame," said Monte Cristo. "Ali is my slave. In saving your life, he served me, and it's his duty to serve me." "But he risked his life," said Madame de Villefort. "I once saved that life, madame. It therefore belongs to me." Madame de Villefort was silent. Perhaps she was thinking about this man whom had made such a deep impression on everyone who saw him. During this moment of silence, Monte Cristo examined the child whose mother was covering him with kisses. He was small and thin and had the pallor which usually goes with red-haired children, yet his rounded forehead was covered with a forest of rebellious black hair, which, falling down to his shoulders and framing his face, doubled the vivacity of his eyes, which were full of sly malice and childish wickedness. His first movement was to shake himself free of his mother's embrace and open the small chest from which the Count had taken the flask containing the red liquid. With the air of a child who is accustomed to satisfying all his whims, he began to uncork the different bottles without asking anyone's permission. "Don't touch that, my boy," said the Count sharply. "Some of these liquids are dangerous not only to taste, but even to inhale." Madame de Villefort turned pale and pulled her son back to her. When her fear had passed, she cast a short but expressive glance at the chest. "Is this your usual residence, Count?" she asked, standing up. "No, madame, it's only a sort of pied-à-terre in the country. I live at 30 Avenue de Champs-Élysées, but I see you're completely recovered and ready to go. I'll have those same horses harnessed to my carriage, and Ali will have the honor of driving you home while your coachman remains here to prepare your carriage. When he's finished, I'll have it taken directly to Madame Danglars by a team of my horses." "But I'd be afraid to go with those horses again." "Oh, you'll see, madame," said Monte Cristo. "In Ali's hands, they'll be as gentle as lambs." Indeed, Ali had just approached the horses holding a sponge soaked in aromatic vinegar, with which he rubbed their nostrils and wiped away the foam and sweat that covered their foreheads. Then he harnessed them to the Count's carriage and climbed up on the seat, to the great astonishment of the onlookers, who had seen the horses running as though carried along by a whirlwind. He was obliged to use the whip on them to get them to start, and even then, they went along at such a slow trot that it took nearly 2 hours to reach Madame de Villefort's home in the Faubourg Saint-Honore. Everything's connecting na gyud. Everything's connected. It's like a web. It's like the Count of Monte Cristo is weaving a web, no, of revenge. That's chapter 25.